Thank you, everybody. Lots of interesting ideas coming out, I think. Blue Team included Andrew Smith as the EOC liaison, and Seth DeBolt, Helen Lake Bullock, Heath Price, Molly Reynolds, Tim West, and Courtney Wheeler, who is the new Student Government Association president. And they were a great team to work with, lots of cool ideas. Our charge, you already know, so I'll skip this. Just to set things up a little bit, one thing that we thought quite a bit about was how this is a different kind of planning exercise. There's kind of the then planning and the now planning. And it all kind of comes down to the point that Dr. Fauci made a few weeks ago, that we don't make the timeline, the virus makes the timeline. And we're in a situation where, as this chart here explains, unexpected and discontinuous events will emerge. So it's actually a different kind of planning that's required, one that is very, very flexible. So I agree completely with some of the other observations that the team leads have made about the need for flexibility in terms of the menus that students are presented, but also in terms of our the planning itself also needs to be super flexible. And the more we can build in flexibility, adaptability, responsiveness, the better it will be. That, of course, means communication has to be key, because it's hard for people to understand that, because it's a different kind of world that we're living in. Anyway, we also had some priorities that I just wanted to mention quickly. Prioritizing the health, safety of students, faculty, and staff, of course. Building in this creativity, this adaptability and flexibility that I just mentioned. Offering approaches that are hybrid to learning that prioritize student learning and graduation while also protecting faculty and staff. And we thought there were opportunities in all of these scenarios to leverage our leadership in research and healthcare to provide resources and guidance for students, faculty, and staff, and also to impact our region positively. And we were committed to being forward-looking and trying to find possibilities for opening up the university to different kinds of learning and different kinds of learners. So for scenario one, this is the so-called normal start, with all the caveats that have already been issued on that. Obviously, this is the one that offers students the rich on-campus experience that so many of them desire. And it's the closest to what we think of as normal. Of course, the big con in this is the vulnerability in case of another outbreak of COVID. But what we proposed for scenario one was a blended learning model, a mix of quality online and in-class learning, plus what we called healthy living, learning, and working. And this healthy living, learning, and working component is one that reappears in every one of these scenarios. So in terms of the instructional side of the so-called normal start, we thought that perhaps all in-person class meetings could be video recorded, so students may choose to attend or to engage remotely with the course. This would allow those students who perhaps have immunocompromised issues to deal with for themselves, or family members or roommates, to make some decisions about whether or not they felt they could attend the class, even if it was a primarily in-person class. So we propose that all courses should be somewhat blended. They should have a mix of remote and in-class learning as appropriate. So this could vary depending on the course objectives and the materials to be discussed and so on. But we could have different kinds of alternate meeting patterns, staggered meeting patterns, as we've heard, and any other set of varieties of those considerations. We also thought that all large courses, and here we have 75, but I realize that there's some guidance out now that suggests 30 should be the measure here, that all large classes could be offered either entirely online or broken up into smaller sections, or in a hybrid format, where a kind of flipped format where the lectures are online and only small labs and discussion sections meet in person. And of course, all of this is designed to reduce the density of traffic on campus, to reduce the density in classrooms, but also in the passageways, doorways, bathrooms, and all the other spaces on campus that students use as they travel to and from their classes. So, of course, as others have mentioned, the classroom spaces themselves would have to be redesigned. And we thought there would be scope for finding underutilized spaces on campus for class meetings. So perhaps there could be some classroom use of spaces that are normally for social events, like the ballroom spaces, or events that are no longer really needed, such as the Boone Center, for example. So there may be ways to find underutilized spaces and kind of expand the options there. Of course, we can also play with time as well as space. So as Katie also suggested, we could expand the hours at which we schedule class meetings to spread things out a bit. And here we just proposed expanded day, but I have heard suggestions of including the weekend hours in such a model as well. And that wasn't something our team necessarily thought was a good idea, but it's there. We really feel, and I think this is coming through in some of the other presentations, that all courses should be built so they can switch to more or completely online for a period of time as conditions may dictate. So maximum flexibility. Of course, this is a lot more work, but thinking of courses in little chunks where you can switch the chunks, as it were, into more online or completely online format is probably the smartest and most flexible thing to do right now. So we think that perhaps each department and college should have detailed plans. I'm sure many are already thinking of this, to implement this switch to online that could have to happen very quickly. And of course, we mustn't forget that students need to be told what's going to happen. They need to be prepared for these kinds of changes. It is not a typical semester. So I think managing expectations and giving students full information so it's not totally confusing to them would be very essential in any of these scenarios. Okay, in terms of the healthy living, learning and working part of this, here we think that UK has an opportunity to be a positive leading example of a science-informed response by a public research university, by a large institution, to a public health crisis. So clearly we will wait to see what Dean DePaula and his group of experts has to say on this and what our public health officials say. But we imagine that we would need to be reconfiguring our residence spaces, our dining spaces, and all campus spaces. We imagine there would have to be a residence hall or a part of one that's designated as a quarantine space. And then there would have to be a suite of measures that were policies, if you like, about behavior and about public health and hygiene measures. So we would have to have some kind of policies about PPE. When do students, faculty and staff have to use PPE? Where would they obtain that PPE? And how would it be? How would compliance be addressed in that? We did have an idea that perhaps teams could compete to design face masks. This could involve the fashion students as well as the engineering students, as well as the Gatton students with their entrepreneurship training, for example. So there's several ideas for how you could get PPE to be something that students especially, but everybody understands what they're expected to do and are okay with that somehow. So that is going to take quite a bit of effort. Clearly, there'd need to be some physical plant changes, and we imagine those in our scenarios. And we think that the role of the university health services and UK healthcare writ large will be really important here to make sure that we're distributing accurate, timely information and that folks have access to the services they need in terms of maintaining their well-being physically and mentally. Some considerations that came up for us regarding scenario one. Obviously, we would have to keep students safe and social distancing, but on our team, there was quite a bit of concern about how exactly that's achieved when regulating the off-campus behavior of our students. I guess you could also add faculty and staff, is really impossible. So how do we feel, how do we mitigate that risk, I guess, of off-campus behavior impacting on-campus health and safety? There are some physical considerations about how do we have enough space to ensure social distancing, even in a modified kind of course scheduling model? And do we have enough equipment to record all in-person classes, if that's what we do? And then digging down to that, we wondered, how could that impact student learning? Because not all students are going to be equally engaged in in-class discussions, for example, if they know it's being recorded. So there's many operational considerations to be taken into consideration here. For scenario 2, this is the delayed start scenario. We thought the obvious pro of this is that there's more time to plan. The obvious con is that it's more challenging for students to complete their credits and for faculty to instruct them in a compressed model. So the kind of learning considerations are very similar, but obviously the schedule would have to be different for a compressed semester. And we had the same concern as other teams regarding experiential opportunities. For scenario 3 posed quite a few issues for our team. We didn't quite know how to think about it. And we ended up thinking about 3 different options for this one. The first was to split the semester and have that kind of 8+8 that Anna mentioned, with the first half being online, second half being in person. The option 2 was to kind of flip those. So the first half of the semester is in person, second half online. And actually, neither of those seemed like particularly good options to us. So, and they don't throw up any particularly original considerations. They're really the same kind of considerations that we have discussed for 1 and 2. So the third one is the one I'll talk about just now, and that is where we suggest that only half the students return to campus at the normal start time and complete their semester in person, and the others complete the semester online. And we proposed or considered having freshmen and sophomores return to campus while juniors and seniors completed their semester online. So the aim here is obviously to reduce the number of students on campus and provide an on-campus experience for the students who most need it. And there was a lot of discussion about, well, the freshmen probably need it. They've had a terrible senior year of high school. They're hungry for this on-campus experience. It would help with recruitment and all the rest of it, and it would set them up for success as students if they had a great freshman experience. And then we thought, well, what about seniors? They're the other one. Group that we might consider need an on-campus experience. But there were some very powerful arguments presented in our discussions for the sophomores whose freshman experience was very disrupted and who could go into a sophomore slump that's even more exaggerated than can happen anyway. So we ended up proposing or suggesting that freshmen and sophomores be those who come to campus in the fall. Obviously, this would allow freshmen and sophomores to have that important social aspect of being a college student and to have a more traditional start to their year. It would perhaps allow our residence and dining halls to operate close to capacity, since these are the folks who mostly stay on campus anyway. But obviously, this does raise some public health concerns. It has the same issues as any on-campus scenario, and no doubt juniors and seniors would suffer, and they would feel left out, and they might feel neglected. So that is a serious issue. Scenario 4 was the online semester experience. This, as others have mentioned, is clearly the safest alternative if we're thinking about the university and public health and COVID-19. But it's perhaps the least attractive. It has the biggest adjustment for us in terms of being a university. There's a risk of significant reduction in student enrollment. And it's clear that there's the issue of virtual learning and teaching burnout on the part of students, faculty, and staff. Of course, there's much excitement about the possibilities of online learning, and everybody can think of good examples of this. But as a mode for another 16 weeks, it seems the least best option to us. What would this look like? Obviously, all courses taught online. We would have to take the best lessons we've learned from the spring and from the summer, and we would have to develop special attention or special accommodations for all experiential learning, especially that which is mandatory, such as for students who need certain experiences to graduate, and for those in the performance majors and so on. So there's some challenges there. In terms of the keeping people healthy, it would be just the same as the others except, of course, we would need much more virtual support. So much more investment in telehealth, in mental health counseling remotely, and so on. And then, of course, we would also have to think again about the experiential learning. How could we conduct that safely? So there are some considerations here which really apply to many of these scenarios. Equitable access to technology, that's something both of the other teams have mentioned, that has to be key. And also we need to attend to those students who, it may not be a technological barrier so much, but that for those students for those students whose home environments are not conducive to study, and we really have to think how to support those folks. So there would be some investment needed in some technology, but also in some services, probably. In terms of a virtual scenario, lots of things would have to be rethought. Clearly, athletics would be impacted, which could impact scholarships. There might be a loss of enthusiasm, not just from students and faculty and staff even, but also perhaps from alums. So we really worry about the all online scenario. We think the university is quite capable of pulling it off and doing a really good job, but it does present some big challenges for us. Just to wrap up, I'd like to present six big ideas that we think could be applied to any scenario that Blue Team came up with. One is we could think about these healthy living, healthy working, healthy learning scenarios. We could think about that as a wildly healthy campus kind of approach, where we really use our expertise, our knowledge and skills in terms of health and healthcare here at the university, and in terms of science, and that we create a suite of policies that are really cutting edge in terms of keeping our faculty, staff, and students safe. Obviously, there would need to be a great deal of training and education about this. Not all of us understand these measures, and so I think ongoing training would be very important. And there would need to be really wide funnels so that folks can access mental health and physical well-being services. Another idea that could cut across all these scenarios is we could think about a special deal, as it were, with our incoming freshmen, our first-year students, those who are so excited about being Wildcats, but how is their semester going to be special, no matter what it ends up being like? And we thought that creating a special branded on-campus experience, but it would have to be one that could be flipped to be virtual if it had to be, would be very important. And we could create a set of packages of support and services for these students that allowed them to be academically successful in a very clear way, because it's going to be confusing this semester, no matter what we do. So how to make this less confusing for these students, how to make them feel valued and give them the appropriate support. So we propose checking in with mentors and coaches and advisors and having some tailored co-curricular programming for our first semester Wildcats. We could also do the same thing or similar thing for our returning sophomores. As I just mentioned, these are folks who've had a rough start. That second semester of freshman year is often super important for academic success and finding your feet as a young person with a good network. So we thought we could also develop a set of packages, a package for these students also to attend to their special needs and keep them engaged and successful in their academic trajectory. And of course, our graduating seniors will also need some love and attention here too. So we thought about a package for our graduating seniors that could build in some of these elements from the first and second year initiatives, but emphasize how can they be successful and how can we help them be successful post-graduation. And they're not graduating into a job market, the likes of which most of us have ever seen. So their anxiety is going to be high, and anything we can do to help them understand how to position themselves well, how to take everything they've learned as students and do the best they can out there in the postgraduate world would be good. So we had some ideas for how we could support our graduating seniors during this challenging time for them. One approach that others have mentioned is you could kind of have a bookend approach where you prioritize the first and fourth year. We kind of moved away from that in some of our suggestions, but certainly we could also consider that. Esports came up as something that we could leverage during this time since it's virtual, and we thought about establishing on-campus competitions, intercollegiate campus competitions within the state of Kentucky, and maybe even international competitions, introducing students to new peer groups and extending themselves all the while. And lastly, and this is my last slide, we wanted to stress that we do think, even though there are so many challenges to be worked through, this moment provides opportunities for a big research university like UK to kind of model collaboration across the disciplines and across the units on campus, operational and academic. We also think we have a chance here to showcase our expertise kind of in action, put some of our knowledge, skills, and experience into play here as we steer this institution through this challenging time. And as others have mentioned, we thought there are also opportunities here to partner with governmental and other leaders as we go into the fall and beyond. So thank you very much for letting me share some of these ideas from the Blue team. I appreciate the time.